So good evening dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 9th November 2024 and today we have some important articles for the discussion, and one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles in a very detailed manner so that this discussion will be helpful for your upcoming prelims examination as well as mains examination. So we have selected few articles which are very important based on the syllabus. So therefore we will try to discuss all these articles one by one in a very comprehensive manner. So you all knew that yesterday I have given one prelims practice question to you. The question is, Delhi Chalo movement in the context of modern Indian history is associated with the which of the following movements? And in fact this is a very important question, and you may have you might have known about or read about the individual satyagraha. And in fact, so this Delhi Chalo movement is part of the individual satyagraha, and it is very important. You need to know why Gandhiji launched this individual satyagraha and who are the participants of this individual satyagraha. And you should also know that the Delhi Chalo movement is part of the individual satyagraha. So the correct answer for this question is option B, that is individual satyagraha. And when we look into the explanation for this question, so Delhi Chalo movement, it was part of the individual satyagraha and that was launched by Mahatma Gandhi. And in fact some of the features of this movement included satyagrahis who were not arrested or marched to Delhi to demand India's independence. And apart from that, so Vinoba Bhave was the first satyagrahi who was selected for the movement, and he was sent to jail for speaking out against the war. And after Vinoba Bhave, the second one was Jawaharlal Nehru was the second satyagrahi as part of the individual satyagraha movement. And you need to remember one thing, that Delhi Chalo movement is part of Gandhiji's individual satyagraha. And today also we have one important prelims practice question. The question is a very important and it is simple and it is based on the recent current affairs. So the State of World's Mangroves Report 2024 report recently seen in news is released by which of the following organizations? Option A, UNESCO. Option B, UN Environment Program. Option C, International Union for Conservation of Nature. And option D, Global Mangrove Alliance. So please try to answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer will be providing you in tomorrow's class, right? So let's get into the discussion, and we have one very important article, and this is very important for your prelims as well as mains examination. So particularly with respect to Article 30 of the Indian Constitution. So we all knew that Article 29 and Article 30 deals with the minority rights, particularly Article 30, the right to establish and administer educational institutions of one's own choice, particularly the minorities. And in fact Supreme Court has did a comprehensive it has examined and it has also come up with a test of a minority institution. So which institution is known as minority institution? So what is the criteria and what are the characteristics of the minority institutions? So in order to understand that, the Supreme Court has come up with a proper test. Now what is the context of this article? First we'll try to understand the context in a very brief manner, and then we'll get into this article. And in fact the Supreme Court has recently overruled a 56-year-old judgment in the Aligarh Muslim University, a minority status case. And in fact, so the case was 56-year-old case with respect to Aligarh Muslim University minority status case, offering a new guidelines for determining the minority character of the educational institution. So whether a particular institute, a university, is a minority institution or not, right? So the case stemming from the historical debates on the Aligarh Muslim University's foundations and the status of Aligarh Muslim University. And in fact this 7-judge bench, constitution bench of the Supreme Court has revisited the critical issues which are involved, which are related to the minorities' rights under Article 29 and Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, and autonomy of these educational institutions, and also the interpretation of the constitutional provisions. The Supreme Court's 7-judge constitution bench has looked into all these important and critical issues. And so we'll try to understand what was this 1967 judgment of the Supreme Court regarding the Aligarh Muslim University. And in fact, the 7-judge bench has overruled the 1967 judgment, and this 1967 judgment of the Supreme Court had denied the Aligarh Muslim University according a minority institution status. So we all knew that Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, particularly fundamental rights, in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution talks about the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. But in the year 1967, the Supreme Court has denied the Aligarh Muslim University a minority institution status. However, the 7-judge bench, Constitution bench has overruled this 1967 judgment of the Supreme Court. And in fact, the majority opinion of the Supreme Court, the majority judge's opinion in the 1967 ruling, so that was just a narrow interpretation. And in fact, it is particularly a formalistic view of the term to establish under Article 30. Now remember, I've told you that under Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, so the Constitution has provided the right to minorities to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. However, in 1967, Supreme Court has gone for the narrow interpretation of the view that establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. And in fact, the Supreme Court has also laid down a new criteria, so a particular criteria to determine the minority character of different institutions across the country. And in fact, this has involved examining the historical efforts and in fact the community's role in founding or funding, and also institutions' objectives, not just statutory incorporation, right? So this is what the Supreme Court has laid down to understand, to identify the minority character of these educational institutions. And the 7-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court has also emphasized that this Aligarh Muslim University's minority educational institution status should consider the historical efforts by the Muslim community in its establishment, right? For example, so Syed Ahmad Khan played a very important and a very significant role when it comes to establishing this Aligarh Muslim University. So the Supreme Court has rightly held that the role of or the historical efforts by the Muslim community in establishing the Aligarh Muslim University should be recognized. And in fact, Supreme Court has also rejected Basha's formalistic interpretation that had ignored the community's contribution in the past or historical efforts of the Muslim community to establish the Aligarh Muslim University. And when we talk about Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, as I have already informed you, I've already told you that Article 30 talks about establishing or administering educational institutions by the minorities, and that is the right which is given to the minority communities in India. And the Supreme Court has rightly reaffirmed under Article 30 of the Indian Constitution that the institutions which are being established by the minorities are entitled to protection and autonomy, right? So they are entitled for the protection and autonomy, and that is rightly recognized by the Indian Constitution itself in the fundamental rights. And in fact, the minority institutions across the country can still be considered as the institutions of national importance without actually losing their minority status. So they can still be the institutions for the minority or minority educational institutions, and they can also be the institutions of national importance. And that is how the Supreme Supreme Court has interpreted Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, and this 7-judge bench of the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court has also rejected the specific view that the governmental recognition or the governmental support, for example, providing land grants to these minority educational institutions or recognition of degrees to which are being provided by these educational institutions, would strip an institutions of its minority character. For example, imagine that there is an educational institution and which is considered as a minority institutional education, and suddenly if for example, if the government provide a land grant to the minority educational institutions, so there should be no rule or no law that strip off the minority educational institution its minority status simply because the government has allocated or government has provided the land grants. So this view of the Supreme Court is also part of its larger interpretation of Article 30 to protect the minority rights and particularly minorities establishing and administering educational institutions to protect themselves or protect their language, culture, everything. So in fact, the Supreme Court has also emphasized that the statutory incorporation should not automatically negate the minority status, and it has also argued that minority institutions do not need to be exclusively administered by the minority group to qualify for the protection under Article 30 of the Indian Constitution, right? So this is how the Supreme Court has actually interpreted Article 30 of the Indian Constitution. Now, what is the impact and the future implications? So we need to understand the future implications as well along with the impact. So when we talk about this particular judgment of the Supreme Court and Supreme Court overruling the previous judgment with respect to the minority status to the Aligarh Muslim University, so of course there are certain implications and there will be impact in future as well, right? So the new guidelines that are brought into effect by the Supreme Court could actually set a precedent for future cases which specifically involves the minority educational institutions, particularly regarding whether minority rights can be waived or surrendered, right? So in fact, a topic that was raised in the past as well in several judgments like Ahmedabad St. Xavier's case in 1975, right? So for example, there are a lot of educational institutions which are also known as the minority educational institutions, right? So it is not easy to strip off the minority educational institution status to certain institutions, and that is what the Supreme Court has dealt in detail in this particular judgment. And in fact, the 3-judge bench will now reconsider the minority status for the Aligarh Muslim University in the light of these new principles, making prior rulings, including those by the Allahabad High Court in the year 2005, which are largely irrelevant. And in fact, the court's liberal stance on minority rights that has further expanded the scope of protection for the institutions which are established by the minorities, thereby overall ensuring that the founding community's intent and history are central to any determination of the minority status. Now see, understand one thing, that Article 30 of the Indian Constitution talks about the minority educational institutions. So the minority educational institutions enjoy certain privileges, so they enjoy certain benefits. So however, the state cannot intervene and the state cannot take away the minority institutions character, right? So it cannot strip off the minority status to these educational institutions, and because of that reason the Supreme Court has intervened. Supreme Court has intervened, and Supreme Court has also talked about different aspects which should be considered in deciding the minority status of these educational institutions, so that they continue to enjoy the rights which are being guaranteed by the Indian Constitution under Article 30 Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, right? So the next article is about the BRICS grouping, right? So BRICS, we all knew that this is an intergovernmental organization. And in this organization, the member countries included Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So these are 5 member countries, but recently 5 more countries became part of this BRICS grouping. So when we talk about the other member countries which are being part of this BRICS grouping, included Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Ethiopia, and also Argentina. So these are different member countries which became part of this BRICS grouping. Now, so we all knew that in the year 2024, the BRICS summit was recently held at a place called Kazan in Russia, right? So Kazan, Russia, so recently hosted the BRICS summit, and in fact it is considered as a critical, a very important, or a pivotal point in the group's overall evolution, right? So why? Because new members were administered into the grouping, right? So 5 more member countries became part of this overall BRICS grouping, and therefore it has been highlighting the resilience of the BRICS grouping and the strong prospects to grow in future, as well as the continued survival and growth amidst the geopolitical challenges. Now, what kind of a geopolitical challenges? So currently we have been seeing, for example, the Israel-Hamas war, Russia-Ukraine war. So these are the geopolitical challenges. Despite all these geopolitical challenges and despite West's severe sanctions on Russia, so BRICS continued to survive and it continued to grow, withstand these geopolitical challenges. So Russia-Ukraine war and China-India relations are also started improving, because recently both India and China have started a disengagement of the forces. And this summit has reflected a BRICS overall transition from emerging economies to a broader platform representing the global south, signaling its rejuvenation despite past struggles as well as the internal differences as well. Right, so that is what we need to understand, because BRICS overall considered as a major force of the global south. Like how G7 is for the global north, BRICS is also known as the major force for the global south. And in fact, in future it is expected to further increase its numbers. It is expected to become more powerful, more strengthened body, and it could even challenge the other organizations or other intergovernmental organizations or groupings like G7 as well, right? So therefore this rejuvenated BRICS grouping shows us that despite the past struggles, despite the past difficulties, so it is expected to further strengthen itself, right? And so we'll try to understand the BRICS expansion and the geopolitical dynamics as well, right? So recently I've just told you that when we talk about the BRICS member countries, so earlier there were 5 member countries which are part of this BRICS grouping: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But recently 5 more members are added to this BRICS grouping, including Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Ethiopia. So these are the 5 countries which recently became part of this BRICS grouping. And in fact, the Kazan summit of the BRICS grouping that is recently held in Russia has emphasized on the BRICS grouping's further expansion, with 5 new members who are joining in the year 2023, right? So they are going to join in the year 2023, and in fact the more countries who wanted to be part of this BRICS grouping, around 34 nations which have been seeking to be part of this BRICS grouping. So that indicates the grouping's overall relevance, overall importance at the global level, particularly as a major force of the global south. So it has been signaling a shift towards inclusivity, and also it would further enhance the global influence as well, because in recent times West's influence, West's dominance has been particularly declining after this Russia-Ukraine war and even given the global geopolitical challenges. Apart from that, if you look at the BRICS, so there are emerging economies. For example, China, the second largest economy, India, the fifth largest economy, and it is expected to become the third largest economy very soon. So therefore, they are major economies and emerging economies, and because of that reason, more and more countries have been showing a lot of interest to become part of this BRICS grouping. And in fact, BRICS as an intergovernmental grouping, it has not seeking a new world order, right? So it don't want it to establish a new world order, rather it has been advocating for the reforms in the global governance to better represent the emerging economies. For example, I have just told you that these are the emerging economies, whether China, India, so all these countries are emerging economies. So therefore, overall, the BRICS grouping has been focusing on countries from Africa, because these are underdeveloped countries in the global south. So therefore, the BRICS grouping has been emphasizing on the inclusion of more and more countries from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia. In fact, so we all knew that United Nations Security Council, where Latin America has no representation, Africa has no representation, and Asia is underrepresented. And in fact, so BRICS actually shows the anti-Western tendencies, and the moderate members like India, Brazil, and South Africa remain, so these countries remain committed to preserving its non-Western orientation and also promoting the multilateral cooperation as well. So apart from that, there are certain key areas of cooperation, key areas of importance for when we talk about BRICS specifically, and it focuses on those key areas, right? So all these member countries would come together, they would sit together, and they would work on these key areas. Now, for example, both India and China are members of the BRICS grouping, but they have they have their own challenges with each other. So recently they have sit together and they started disengagement at the border areas. So that is a positive sign, and in fact, BRICS has a lot of potential, right? So in fact, this cousin summit focused on conflicts in West Asia, calling for a ceasefire and also the establishment of a Palestinian state. Now, for example, if you look at India and India's stance over this Israel-Palestine conflict, so India traditionally supported the two-state solution. So however, but the BRICS grouping, or it was criticized for not addressing the terrorist attack by the Hamas, and thereby reflecting the internal differences as well. There are a lot of internal differences within the BRICS grouping. For example, some countries within BRICS have their own traditional policies and they still stick to those policies, but on the other hand, there are some revisionist countries, so they wanted a different outcome with respect to the Israel and Palestine or Israel Hamas conflict. So that was being criticized by the Western countries. However, in fact, the cousin summit has also emphasized on the local currencies, particularly the de-dollarization of the global economy, right? De-dollarization of the global economy. So when we talk about the de-dollarization of the global economy, recently we have heard that a BRICS currency, right? So negotiations also took place regarding the BRICS currency as an alternative to the dollar, particularly to reduce the domination or dominance of US dollar through bringing in the BRICS currency for the intra grouping trade. And in this cousin summit, they have discussed about the local currencies as well as the financial cooperation as well. So therefore, expectations for massive capital boost to the new development bank. Remember that the BRICS grouping has established this new development bank, so they were being tempered by the Saudi Arabia's hesitance, right? So Saudi Arabia is not that much interested, because Saudi Arabia has also become part of the BRICS grouping as a part of BRICS expansion. So however, there are a lot of initiatives to strengthen social and economic development through sports, culture, civil society. So all these different aspects are discussed in this cousin summit. So overall, aiming for the long term effective collaboration between all these countries and to achieve whatever economic, political, and the strategic goals that these countries have, and also the collective prosperity, growth, stability, peace at the global level are the other objectives of this BRICS grouping. And in this context, we should understand what is India's role in this BRICS grouping. So remember that India is a major technological, a major economic and also military power, and India is going to become the third largest economy very soon after China. So therefore, India has the larger role in the BRICS grouping. And the other significant aspect about India is that India also maintains very close and friendly relations with the Western countries, including European Union as well as America. So BRICS helps India maintain the strategic autonomy. So we follow the policy of strategic autonomy. So our core objective of the foreign policy is our national interest. And India also wanted to promote multipolarity. So India don't want a new Cold War, right? So India don't want a new Cold War between the West, particularly between the US and the China. So India strongly committed itself to promote multipolarity, and India also wanted to advocate the interests of the global south, and that's why India is known as the leader of the global south. So along with that, India also further wanted to deepen and strengthen its relations with both Russia as well as China. And in fact, a key outcome of the summit was the first meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as the Chinese President Xi Jinping in the last 5 years. So thereby it has been signaling a potential thaw in the bilateral relations between these two countries. And in fact, India has also shifted from a cautious to more strategic approach when it comes to the BRICS expansion, because India has been recognizing the importance or increased membership could further amplify the global's influence and positioning India as a bridge between the East and West. Remember that India has a friendly ties with both East and West, and because of that reason, there is an opportunity for India to become a bridge between the East and the West. So the next article is which is given in the Hindu newspaper, that Zomato and Swiggy breached the antitrust laws held by the Competition Commission of India. So in this article, we'll understand what is the Competition Commission of India. So when it was established, now how Competition Commission of India ensures a competitive environment in economy, and what are the problems with the Zomato and Swiggy which have breached these antitrust laws. So the context is that in the year 2022, a National Restaurant Association of India, NRAI, has filed a complaint against the online food delivery platforms Zomato and Swiggy. And in fact, both Zomato and Swiggy are two largest food delivery platforms in India. And in fact, the National Restaurants Association of India has accused them of anti-competitive practices that harmed other restaurants and has also disrupted the fair market competition, because it is the responsibility and objective of the Competition Commission of India to establish the fair market, to ensure a competitive spirit in the economy, in the market, right? But on the other hand, in the probe of Competition Commission of India, both these food delivery platforms have done the anti-competitive practices, have adopted these anti-competitive practices, and they also harm the other restaurants and disrupted the fair market competition. And in fact, in India, Competition Commission of India, which is a statutory body. I hope you knew what is a statutory body. Statutory body is any body which is established by a law of the parliament. And in fact, CCI monitors business practices to ensure fair competition, and it was launched an investigation into this matter. And what are the issue? So we need to understand the issue, because of which the National Restaurants Association of India has filed a complaint against the online food delivery platforms Zomato and Swiggy. And in fact, both Zomato and Swiggy have allegedly entered into exclusive agreements with certain restaurants, right? So they have exclusive agreements with the certain restaurants. So the agreements in exchange of offering lower commission fees, and these platforms required some restaurants to list only on their platforms, so thereby making it harder for the other food delivery services to compete. Secondly, the exclusivity deals concentrated market share among a very few platforms, and that further hurt the competition as well, right? So these exclusive agreements, for example, restaurants having exclusive agreements makes the other food delivery platforms cannot be able to access food or deliver food from those restaurants, right? So it impacts the competition, it impacts the fairness in the market. And in fact, both Zomato and Swiggy have imposed the price parity clause on the restaurants. So what is this price parity clause? So we'll try to understand this as well. So this price parity clause actually means that restaurants had to match their prices across all platforms. So restaurants have to maintain a similar prices across the all platforms, so thereby preventing them from offering cheaper prices on the other food delivery platforms, right? So this is another major problem with the online food delivery platforms such as Zomato and Swiggy. And in fact, Swiggy has also reportedly threatened to lower the ranking of certain partner restaurants, so if they failed to maintain this price parity. And Zomato has also enforced discount restrictions, and it has also penalized restaurants that have violated these specific conditions. Now, what are the key findings of the Competition Commission of India? So we'll try to understand that aspect as well. So this complaint was filed by National Restaurants Association of India, and then Competition Commission of India has started an investigation on this matter on both Swiggy and Zomato. So Competition Commission of India has concluded that the practices have hindered the competition in the food delivery market, so thereby favoring certain restaurants over the others, and also reducing the consumer choice, and thereby impacting the competition and fairness in the economy. And the investigation that is conducted by the Competition Commission of India has also found that the food delivery platforms actions, particularly imposing exclusivity and price parity requirements, have harmed the overall fairness of the market as well as the restricted competition. So Competition Commission of India, so we'll try to understand briefly about what is this Competition Commission of India, because there is a chance that questions may be asked in preliminary examination, what is this Competition Commission of India? And in fact, in the year 2023 mains itself, a question on this Competition Commission of India has been asked, so therefore it is also very, very important. So Competition Commission of India, as I have already told you, that it is a statutory body of the government of India, because it is responsible for enforcing Competition Act 2002, and it was duly constituted in March 2009. And in fact, the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, MRTP Act 1969, was repealed or replaced by the Competition Act 2002 on the recommendations of the Raghavan Committee. So you have to remember the MRTP Act 1969, and based on the recommendations of the Raghavan Committee, MRTP was replaced with the Competition Act in the year 2002. So this is about the Competition Commission of India. Along with that, the other aspects that Zomato and Swiggy have gone for these anti-competitive trade practices. So the next article is 50th Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud, is going to retire, right? So just remember that Justice Chandrachud is 50th Chief Justice of India, right? So he officially retired, and in fact he served a long tenure, and it has encompassed a lot of judicial reforms and also historical verdicts as well, right? So however, he will be succeeded by the 51st Chief Justice of India. So 51st Chief Justice of India, so Justice Sanjeev Khanna, and currently the senior most judge in the Supreme Court as well, right? So for example, when we talk about the Chief Justice of India, we'll try to understand some constitutional provisions, how he's being appointed, what are his powers, what are his functions, and how he's being removed. So when we talk about the Chief Justice of India, so he is the head of the judiciary, without a doubt. So he's the head of the judiciary. He's at because he's the the Chief Justice of India, and he's also known as the highest ranking judge of the Supreme Court of India. And in fact, so when we talk about the role and the responsibility of the Chief Justice of India, so he upholds justice, and safeguarding the constitution is the responsibility of the judiciary. So since he is the highest and top ranking judge, so the major responsibility falls upon the Chief Justice of India. And when we talk about the appointment of the Chief Justice of India, so CJI along with the other judges of the Supreme Court are being appointed by the President under clause 2 article 124 of the Indian Constitution. So you just have to remember this. So first thing, CJ and other judges are appointed by the President under article 124 of the Indian Constitution. So after consultation with the judges of the Supreme Court as well as High Courts, as the President may deem necessary. And in fact, so President is bound by the collegium system. I hope you knew about this collegium system. So collegium system consisting of the Chief Justice of India and 4 more senior judges of the Supreme Court, right? So President is bound by the recommendations of the collegium body of 5 senior most judges of the Supreme Court, and in fact it is being headed by the Chief Justice of India. So when we talk about the tenure of the Chief Justice of India, so it is until they attain the age of 65 years or until they resign or being removed by the impeachment. And once their tenure ends, Chief Justice of India and other Supreme Court judges are prohibited from practicing law in any Indian court. So they cannot practice law in any Indian court according to Article 124 Clause 7 of the Indian Constitution. And these are some details with respect to the Chief Justice of India. So I hope you have understood this, and thank you so much.